are the top 5 most underrated roller coasters in the UK in my opinion? Well, Spinball Wizard, Galactica, the Big One, Speed No Limits and Grand National are all very underrated UK roller coasters. Make sure you subscribe and click the bell to enable notifications so you don't miss any more really short videos like this. You guys asked for really short videos, so I'm giving you a really short video. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time. On a serious note, in this video I'm going to be discussing my opinions personally on the top 5 most underrated roller coasters in the UK and explaining why I think these roller coasters that I'm going to be talking about are underrated. And as for the short videos, I am going to try and make these sorts of videos shorter because you guys have asked for short videos, not going to be quite as short as that little introduction there. But yeah, you guys have asked for short videos, so I'm going to give you shorter videos pretty much, because these videos can often go on quite long with me waffling on just about all sorts. It's like stuff like when I'm discussing like the facts about rides and all sorts, and like the whole experience in loads of detail, when in terms of a review that might be more appropriate, but in terms of these like top 10, top 5 videos, I'm like doing it in those as well. And I mean, do I really need to do that? Like, I'm not sure I do. Like, you guys like want to know from this video, like you're going to be clicking on this video wanting to know why I think, like, you know, I rate it how I do and like why it's so good, like not necessarily like all the little facts and yeah that I just end up putting in my videos and that some other YouTubers put in. So instead of like making really long videos and giving you everything, I'm going to try and focus more on sort of shorter videos and sort of giving you more quality rather than quantity, because I think it is something I need to work on. I've literally received like a message a couple of days ago like from somebody else asking me to do shorter videos, so yeah, don't worry, they are going to be shorter. It's just like some of the sit down stuff, like last video when I was like discussing everything that sort of has happened with the channel and what I'm going to be doing to like make things sort of better again after we've had a bit of a sort of down period with it. I had so much to like discuss in that video, I couldn't like cut it down, if you know what I mean. But like with some of my other videos, I'm sometimes like discussing stuff I don't necessarily need to, like these. So yeah, and oh, I'm waffling on. I'm already waffling on in this video, and it's meant to be a shorter video. Oh dear. Coming in then at number 5, we have Galactica at Alton Towers. I mean, the two sort of roller coasters that people would say at Alton Towers are perhaps underrated would, you know, be Galactica or 13. Like, maybe Rita, but then again, everyone's been saying Rita's been running really well this season, and I wouldn't know because I still can't go to parks. I've not been able to go to Alton Towers at all this year. But I mean, I mentioned that so many times on the channel already, I probably don't need to go into that again, but yeah, hopefully in 2021 I'll be back. But yeah, I mean, Galactica or 13, I had to choose one, didn't I? And I chose Galactica because, I mean, like, 13's not underrated, it's just tame, let's be honest. But yeah, I mean, Galactica, for those of you who don't know, is a B&M flying roller coaster, so essentially what that means is that you are suspended below the track, and instead of being sat upright, you're sat sort of forward, face down. Or not even, what am I on about? You're not sat face down, you're led face down. Held in by this sort of vest restraint, these like leg loop things as well. There's so many restraints on Galactica, like. Yeah, so why do people sort of not rate this ride then? Well, it's because it's not like that forceful, and many people find the restraints uncomfortable. Like, yeah, that's pretty much why people don't rate this. I mean, you know, it's around 60 odd foot tall. I'll put the statistics on screen. I know I said I'm not going to get into statistics. I can't speak, but I'll still display them on screen. It's literally around 60 odd foot tall. You know, it's you know, just under 50 miles an hour. It's got 2 inversions in there, including a fly to lie and the lie to fly, the fly to lie bit. Basically, pretty much you flipped onto your back for part of the ride, to put it simply. But yeah, pretty much this coaster, it's in the Forbidden Valley area of the park. And it's as I've described. It's also got another inversion in there apart from the fly to fly thingy, which is basically just an inline twist where you pretty much rolled over. But yeah, pretty much this ride just manoeuvres through the Forbidden Valley area of the park, diving in and out of tunnels. You got a few turns in there. Elements wise, it's definitely not the strongest ride ever, but what makes it for me is the fact that you're just lying down. It's just such a fun ride, seeing sort of, you know, you're diving through tunnels. I don't know, it just offers a unique experience, the fact that you're in that position. Like, it's not the fastest ride, you know, in the world at all. You know, I said it's just under 50 miles an hour. It doesn't exactly maintain that well throughout the ride. It is quite slow in a lot of places. It's not that forceful, as I've said, pretty much because it's not going that fast throughout the majority of the layout. Like, the pacing's not the best on it. But the fact you just let down, I know people find that uncomfortable, and don't get me wrong, if you sat on the brake run for ages, it can be uncomfortable. But personally, I don't find it that uncomfortable. You know, probably because I'm quite a small person. I feel like maybe if you were a bit larger, that sort of ride might be a bit uncomfortable, but you know, there are all sorts of reasons why someone may find that ride uncomfortable, and you know, I can understand why someone would, but personally I don't find it uncomfortable. The reason I'm only putting this as a number 5 in a list is because this ride does have its fans, but many sort of don't like it. And some even would go as far as to say they hate it. Many rate it sort of towards the bottom of the big 7. But personally, if I was to include how I would predict the Smiler in there, then I would rate Galactica 4th in the big 7, just above Oblivion. I know my reputation is literally going to be like, but yeah, I mean, it's not already great, is it, at the moment? But yeah, so just above Oblivion, and then just below the Smiler, which I predict will be number 3 for me in the big 7. But yeah, that's all there really is to say about it, because it's like, it is very underrated, but just not as underrated as the rest of the rides in this list, because it does still have like a few fans who rate it similar to me. In comparison to some of the other rides. But yeah, pretty much many find it uncomfortable, many find it just not forceful, and therefore don't really rate it. But yeah, on to number 4. Coming in then at number 4, we have the Marathon Spinning Roller Coaster. Also oh dear, yeah, that was my phone, guys. It's a good job I've got that on silent. I'm literally using this as a torch. Like, you know what? I should probably, you know what? I should like show you the position I got, because it's just that I've noticed that the lighting here sometimes is a bit dark, and obviously my phone's against the window that's behind the camera, and because it's like vibrating against there, it's still quite loud when it vibrates. But yeah, Spinball Wizard, a marathon spinning roller coaster, also at Alton Towers, and another very underrated ride. This ride, well, it's not exactly hated, it just never gets talked about, and for that reason, you know, it's underrated, very underrated. Like, yeah, like, there are very few fans of this ride that I'm aware of, like, big fans, compared to Galactica, which like has sort of a few more fans, and yeah, it's a really forceful ride. Like, Towers class it as a family coaster, but it's a really forceful ride. Like, it's definitely more intense than 13, and it's probably similar intensity to Wicker Man, solely because it's spinning round, so obviously you're being spun throughout the layout, you know, all these different angles, and that means obviously when you go through the elements you get some unique sensations, and sometimes the trains are spinning in such a way that it can make the ride, you know, really intense. And the soundtrack is literally more underrated than the ride. Like, it's a brilliant soundtrack. Like, it's one of the best soundtracks at Towers, apart from the Galactica soundtrack, which I forgot to pay appreciation to when we were going through number 5. Like, that soundtrack is so amazing. You've already heard that in the background, and now you will be able to hear the Spinball Wizard soundtrack. But it's such a good soundtrack. Like, it's a brilliant soundtrack. It's kind of got this arcade, you know, sort of feel to it to fit the ride, which is obviously themed to this pinball machine. And IMAscore have done a brilliant job with the soundtrack for that ride, and you know, I love it. Like, it's certainly much better than the Smiler soundtrack, put it that way. But yeah, anyway, I'm going off on one again. As for the ride itself, yeah, it just didn't get talked about, but it's a brilliant. Like, I rate it above Rita and 13 in terms of rides in the Big 7, and I'm telling you that now. Like, and it should be in the Big 7. Like, come on, Towers, why is it not in the Big 7? Make the Big 7 the Big 8. Like, surely you can fit one more ride in there. Like, because I mean, I like, as much as it is not as thrilling as quite a few other rides at the park, like Oblivion, you know, Nemesis, stuff like that. It is, you know, it's up there. It's up there in terms of thrills, solely because it spins, as I said, while you're going round sort of rounds. And yeah, it's got some brilliant elements. It's got obviously like the overbank, which isn't quite overbanked. It's got the helixes. You know, it's got a good selection of elements. Like, it's a good layout. I personally prefer Crush's Coaster at Disneyland Paris in terms of marathon coasters, because I've done that one as well, because of the theming. But Spinball is probably more intense than it, even though it is a bit shorter. I feel like one of the main reasons this ride doesn't get talked about and doesn't get rated is because of another marathon spinning coaster called Dragon's Fury at Chessington World of Adventures, which is apparently better because of the fact that it's like longer and apparently it's smoother, even though Spinball is a bit jolty, but it's not exactly rough, is it? Like, come on guys. Like, it's because it's like 500 foot longer or something, and it's got this extra lift hill which makes it this extra special ride apparently, and it's also like better themed, and that makes it like really special in comparison as well. I mean, I probably shouldn't be saying this stuff because I've never rode it, and I'm probably going to get even more backlash, but yeah, maybe it's better, maybe it's not, but most people say it's better, which means it probably is better. Even though I know people personally who think Spinball is better. But I mean, who knows, because Chessington's just an overrated park, like, seriously. But yeah, Spinball Wizard is a brilliant ride with some great forces. It's intense, and that's why I'm putting it at number 4. I don't think it's as underrated as some of the other coasters in this list, because, like, in terms of the coasters on this list, like, I'd rate it the lowest of the lot of them. Like, I do rate Galactica above it, just because, you know, I like sort of the flying sensation, even though like Galactica is probably less forceful than Spinball, to be honest, but you know, I'm a sucker for that flying position, so yeah, no one else is, or not many people anyway, but there are even less Spinball fans than there are Galactica fans, so yeah, I'm rating it above Galactica. But without further ado, let's get on to number 3. Coming in then at number 3, we have Grand National at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. I absolutely hated this ride when I first rode it in 2015, but then in 2019, a certain enthusiast called Josh from Theme Park Mad, yeah, go and check out Theme Park Mad. a brilliant YouTube channel and Instagram, and I say this in every video, don't I? Just go and do it, alright? Yeah, I rode it again on a non-wheel seat, and I loved it. Because I can't even remember if I did ride it on a wheel seat in 2015, but yeah, whatever I rode it on, it felt really rough and I didn't really like it. Well, no, I didn't like it. It put me off from going back on it, put it that way, because I disliked it that much and found it that rough. But yeah, for those of you who don't know, the wheel seats on wooden roller coasters tend to be a lot rougher than non-wheel seats, because for those of you, I mean, obviously the wheel seats are going over the track, and on wooden coasters, obviously it's got sort of more sort of, what are those things? I don't know what those things are even called that are like go across the track, but it has like more of them, so the wheels like going over them, and obviously, you know, it's kind of causes the train to like bounce up and down a bit. You know what I mean? You know what I mean if you've been on a wooden roller coaster. But yeah, obviously if you're on a non-wheel seat, you're not like above the wheels, so you can't feel like the wheels underneath you the same, and so generally your ride's a bit smoother. You know, it's the same with some steel coasters, but mainly the wooden ones because of how the track's designed. But yeah, this ride is an absolute airtime machine. Like, you are flung out. Like, it's mainly basically, this ride is basically loads of small airtime hills and turns. Like, that is the ride. Like, the layout is pretty basic, but it works. Like, because it's just so thrilling because you just continuously like flung out of your seat, and I just love it. But people hate on this ride because it's rough, but like, some would disagree with me and say it's just smooth on any, like if you're on a wheel even. But personally, like saying that, I did ride it on the front row on a wheel seat and it was okay, but the other ride I had, which I think was on a wheel seat in 2015, I really didn't enjoy it. Yeah, I think, you know, on a non-wheel seat this ride is really good though. Like, I can understand why people hate on this ride because it's on, like, if they've ridden it on wheel seats. But yeah, I just don't see people racing it how I do. Like, I think it's better than Megaphobia at Oakwell, because that thing's just, yeah, overrated. I really think that's an overrated. Like, I think Grand National is better than Megaphobia. Not as good as Wicker Man, which is my #1 wooden roller coaster in the UK, but it's better than Megaphobia. But yeah, people just hate on this ride, and I just don't see it getting really many fans at all. So yeah, it's similar to Spinball. It doesn't really have any sort of fan base. But unlike Spinball, it like gets hated on, hence why I'm putting it above. I'm putting it above Spinball Whizzer. Yeah, I rate it above Spinball Whizzer. I don't rate it above Galactica, to give you guys an idea. But yeah, it's just got so much airtime, which I feel like needs to be appreciated more. And you know, it's fun, it's fast, it's really well paced. I just love it. But I never see it like appearing in people's top 10s and stuff like that in terms of top 10 rides in the UK, and it's in mine. Like, yeah, and personally it's my 4th favourite coaster at Pleasure Beach as well, so it is up there. But yeah, that's all there really is to say about it. It's underrated, it's overhated, and it's a brilliant wooden roller coaster. If you're on the right seats, like, you know, I don't sort of, you know, it doesn't affect sort of my rankings that it rode badly for me on that wheel seat ride I had, just because, you know, the other rides were good. I don't think it's really fair to sort of, you know, lower it in my rankings and sort of rank it lower just because, you know, it rides badly on certain seats. Like, I appreciate rides for what they are. You know, if a ride rides well on one seat, you know, I'll give it the credit for that one seat. Like, I just feel like that's the fair way to rate rides. But if you have a different opinion on that, that's absolutely fine. And I can understand, you know, if your opinion is that, you know, a ride should ride well on any seat, you know, that's fine. But yeah, on to number 2. Coming in then at number 2, we have another Blackpool Pleasure Beach classic, and that is the Aerodynamics Hypercoaster, the UK's tallest roller coaster and the tallest roller coaster in the world when it opened back in 1994. I'm talking about the big one, again at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Now, this is a ride that I have done a separate review on, so if you want to hear more about my thoughts on this ride in, you know, a great amount of detail, you know, what I think of sort of every little detail of the ride, because that's sort of what the reviews are for, really. You know, these top 10s, top 5s, I'm going to give more brief sort of overviews of the rides from now on, and the reviews I'll go into more detail, you know, to help with sort of video length. And stuff like that, because, you know, it's not, I don't think it's like necessary to like repeat myself in different videos, like, yeah, and I have been guilty of doing that in the past. But yeah, click the card in the top right, and hooray, I actually, yeah, click the card in the top right. I was just trying to get out of the way there. Click the card in the top right to go and watch that video. Yeah, as for this ride, many people, well, it gets some hate for being rough, but many people just don't rate it and don't think it's that good because it doesn't give much airtime. And I will agree, a coaster of 213 foot really should give airtime, because, you know, it's got the potential to have the speed to give really good airtime, but the hills on the big one are just so high, they don't give any airtime. And they're not really steep enough either to give it, just because the train isn't going steep enough over the crests of oh no, what there? The train isn't going fast enough over the crests of those hills to give any airtime really whatsoever, although you can get a little pop of airtime on some of the hills if you sat at the back, a bit of a pop of floater, that is. Like, if you expecting any ejector from this ride, then just get that thought out of your head. Like, this ride gives zero ejector airtime whatsoever, but little bits of floater if you're on the back. But yeah, you know, this ride though does have an excuse for how high its hills are, and that's just because of so much is cramped into Blackpool. It's such a compact park that they just couldn't make the hills any lower, you know, because this ride was going to be inspired by Magnum XL 200s, which is an Arrow hypercoaster at Cedar Point. It's the first ever hypercoaster, and that's renowned for its really strong ejector airtime and sort of low airtime hills, but it just can't work in Blackpool because of how compact the park is in comparison to Cedar Point, which is a much bigger park. So, you know, we're left with sort of this coaster with some high airtime hills that spends most of its layout really high off the ground. But yeah, you've got to appreciate, and this is the thing, I rate this as my 4th favourite roller coaster in the UK, and, you know, I appreciate the fact that we have this in the UK. Like, the first drop is a big reason why I rate this ride so high. It's the best first drop on any roller coaster. Like, it's such a snappy transition, it's fairly steep, and yeah, for that reason it's just incredible, and it gives some good positive G-force at the bottom as well. Like, if you're on the back and you go down that, you get absolutely whipped down it, and, you know, I love the sort of whip you get from it. You know, and that's why my favourite you know, drop on any roller coaster. And then after that, the ride doesn't do that much, admittedly, but the views you get over Blackpool are stunning. And I love coasters, you know, I'm a bit of a sucker for coasters that give amazing views. Like, the view you get from the big one out to sea, and then you look left and you can see sort of, you know, you can see all over Blackpool, sort of out of Blackpool. And then sort of to the right of you and behind you, you can see the
rides, the shows, the fun, the thrill.
okay, we went through that in the big one review. Let's not put ourselves through that again. But yeah, it's just incredible the views you get, and you get so many good views all the way around the ride as well. You get some brilliant head choppers. So despite the fact the ride gives no airtime, I still think it's a good ride. But it gets hate for being a bit rough as well. But you know, Blackpool, as I've said before, they've done more than retrack that ride. You know, more than retrack it for 2020, and it rides quite smooth now on the section, you know, or one of the sections that was renowned for being quite rough. And I think they've definitely done some maintenance on it as well, because when I rode it at the start of the year, it was running really smooth around the whole layout, and you know, it was really enjoyable. And personally, I never found it unbearable at all, really. Like, I had one really rough ride in 2018 on it, but since then, you know, it's jolty. It's been jolty, but you know, it's been perfectly bearable for me, to be honest. Some of us would disagree, but yeah, roughness doesn't ruin it for me, and I wouldn't personally class it as a rough ride, to be honest. Well, definitely not now they've done the retrack and I'm guessing some maintenance for 2020, but even before, I wouldn't have classed it as a rough ride, to be honest. But yeah, personally, the reason I sort of rate it above Grand National, it's similar. It doesn't really have a big fan base either. Like, there are some fans of it, like there are Grand National, but you know, I rate it above it in this list because there are many people who would rate Grand National above the big one. Like, I don't personally, but yeah, and I feel like that the big one, to be honest, probably gets more hate than Grand National, which, yeah, I feel like it does. So, you know, big one and Grand National could be interchangeable here, but yeah, personally, I think big one is a bit more underrated than Grand National is, and that's obviously, as I said, largely because I do rate it quite a bit higher than Grand National, to be honest. But yeah, last but not least, then let's get on to number one. Coming in then at number one, we have Speed No Limits, the Gerstlaught Eurofighter at Oakwood Theme Park in Wales. Yes, I was, well, pleasantly surprised by this ride when I rode it, to say the least. If you want to hear my thoughts in more detail about this again, I've done a review of it, so click the card in the top right to go and see that. But yeah, this ride is the tallest Eurofighter in the UK. It's taller than Soar, it's taller than Rage. It may only have 2 inversions, but wow, it still packs a punch. For those who don't know, these rides have a vertical lift hill, as you'll be able to see on screen now, and beyond vertical drop, speeds being 97 degrees. And at the bottom of that drop, it's packed with force. You get over 4G at the bottom of that drop. And then you are flung into this airtime hill, which gives really strong ejector airtime that nobody talks about. And nobody talks about this ride in general. It doesn't get that much hate. Some people say it's a bit rough, and I'm telling you now, it is not rough. Like, it's got the odd rattle to it, but really, it's almost kind of smooth, really.
It wasn't even rough, that was smooth.
Yeah, I mean, like, you are flung into that airtime. It's quite possibly the best start to a coaster ever. The fact you get so much force at the bottom of that first drop and you're flung to that airtime, like, it's the best start, I'm going to say this now, to a coaster, like, ever, out of any coaster I've ridden, really. You know, it probably is, like, off the top of my mind, you know, it probably is the best start to a coaster I've ridden. And I mean, this POV clip says it all. But yeah, you then go into an overbank turn, and you got this loop which is intense. You got a mid-course, you got another inversion, and then you got a turn, another helix, which is, I mean, that's quite intense as well. And then that's the end of the ride. Yes, it's short. Yes, it only has 2 inversions, and the other 2 Eurofighters in the UK have 3 inversions. I've not ridden either of them, so I'm not going to go commenting on them again because I don't want any backlash. But yeah, Speed is a brilliant ride, and it just doesn't get talked about. Perhaps that's because it's in the middle of Wales, so not many UK enthusiasts have ridden it compared to a lot of other rides in the UK. Like, I'm telling you now, I bet less people have ridden Speed than any other coaster that's featured on this list. It just never gets talked about, and for that reason it makes it really underrated alone. In terms of where I rate it, out of the rides that are featured in this list, I rate it above Grand National, but I rate it below Galactica, just to give you guys an idea. Yeah, but it's had its hate for being a bit rough, but it's a really intense ride. It's the most intense ride on this list, definitely. If it adds more elements in it, a couple more elements, because it is so short, I'd definitely rate it higher. Definitely, it'd probably be close to, it would be number 5 or above in terms of my rankings of UK coasters. But yeah, it just doesn't ever get talked about. Like, yeah, just never does. And as I said, it's probably because not many people have ridden it, but it's such a brilliant ride. But yeah, absolutely brilliant this ride is, and for the fact it goes, it's never talked about alone, and the fact it's so good, I had to put it up here as the number 1 most underrated coaster in the UK. But there you have it, the top 5 most underrated roller coasters in the UK. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you subscribe and click the bell to enable notifications so you don't miss out on any more videos like this. Make sure you leave this video a like if you liked, and comment down below your opinions on sort of the coasters I've mentioned in this video, as well as your top 5 most underrated coasters in the UK. But with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.